Now, it's my pleasure to introduce Clare Luce to you. She's the granddaughter of Clare Boothe Luce and named after her. For almost a dozen years, we've been honored to have Clare as a member of our board of directors. She's been an enthusiastic supporter of our work with conservative women, and we're so honored to have her in the leadership of the Luce Center. Clare was a favorite of her grandmother, Clare Boothe Luce, and after Mrs. Luce's husband, Henry, died, Clare traveled extensively with Mrs. Luce. Clare developed a uniquely special relationship with the woman we chose to name this organization after. Clare told me this story about how she began traveling with her grandmother. She said, "I had seen her at a family gathering, a party. She beckoned to me with her index finger, and I thought, oh boy, what does she want? Because it was very intimidating to be named after her. I mean, I saw her on television and in person when I was little, and whenever she and my grandfather Henry Luce visited, everyone was quaking in their boots. I remember lots of nervous servants waiting around. She asked me a series of questions, and the next day she rang me up and said, 'Do you think you could accompany me for a month and a half?' I said yes, and then thought, what have I done? Of course, it was a life-altering experience in every way. Not only did I get to know well the person for whom I was named, but I also got quite an education." Clare said of her time traveling with her grandmother, "I might have gone to a number of different colleges, but I really went to the University of Clare Boothe Luce. That was a very good education." Now, Clare lives here in Florida and in California, where she and her late husband, Cliff, had a vineyard. They made the most wonderful wine from their own fruit. I got to taste it. The label on the bottle said Clare Luce Abbey Estate, St. Helena, California, and the wine emblem was homage to the Presidential Medal of Freedom bestowed on Clare Boothe Luce by President Reagan in 1983. The Abbey on the label was her husband of 23 years, Cliff Abbey, who Clare lost to early onset Alzheimer's 10 years ago, way too early. Such a wonderful, funny, smart, gorgeous man. After she married Cliff, they started a company, San Francisco 415 Company, designing and manufacturing great sportswear. For 15 years, they ran the clothing company on weekdays and spent their weekends at their home and vineyard in the Napa Valley. They sold the company in 2002 to run their wine venture full-time. Clare had moved to San Francisco in the 1980s after growing up on the North Shore of Long Island, New York. In San Francisco, Clare was a photojournalist and a freelance photographer, and later was a writer-producer for a local television show that featured the finest restaurants and wineries in the Bay Area called The Epicurean Lifestyle. Clare and I met through President Reagan's closest friend, Bill Clark, and what could be more right than having Clare Boothe Luce's granddaughter, who was named after her, help direct our organization from the board. She's been a great board member now for these years and given us wonderful things that were her grandmother's. For example, photographs, dresses that were custom made for Clare Boothe Luce, purses and awards, and we have them on display in our headquarters office in Virginia. I know some of you have seen them. What an addition they are to the office. I could go on about Clare, but I want to give Clare the podium now to tell you about her extraordinary grandmother in her talk, which is titled, Wear It Well, Labels, Political Fashion, and You. Please join me in welcoming Clare Luce.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you. It really is an honor to be here. My grandmother was actually the first person to get me up to a podium like this. Way back when, she would occasionally send me in her stead to give a speech. I still remember how nerve-wracking it was, and believe me, Clare Boothe Luce is an impossible act to follow. Then and now. I remember on one particular occasion when I was slated to speak in her place, she promised to help me with my remarks ahead of time. I was elated, but then crickets. Not a word. After stringing me along for what seemed like an eternity, a large envelope finally arrived in the mail. At last, the rhetorical reinforcements had arrived. I gleefully ripped open the manila envelope. Inside was a folded, poster-sized piece of paper with these 4 words scrawled in her handwriting. Have a good time. Not exactly a keynote. Basically, she was saying, you're on your own, kid. It took me a long time to realize what a vote of confidence it was to be sent on such missions and not be scripted. I eventually realized she was helping me, or perhaps forcing me, to find my voice and shape my own opinions. I am so grateful for her vote of confidence in me then, and yours today. It really is a great pleasure to be with you. Seeing all of you genuinely gives me hope for this beleaguered country of ours. You have no idea how much your enthusiasm fills my heart. You raise my spirits. You and Tulsi Gabbard. Wasn't it an amazing thing last month to hear the former Democratic House member and presidential candidate say something that mattered? I'm going to quote her so I get it right. I can no longer remain in today's Democratic Party, she said, a Democratic Party that is now under the complete control of an elitist cabal of warmongers driven by cowardly wokeness, who divide us by racializing every issue and stoke anti-white racism, actively work to undermine our God-given freedoms that are enshrined in our Constitution. She condemned the party for being hostile to people of faith and spirituality, while demonizing the police and protecting criminals at the expense of law-abiding Americans. I couldn't have said it better myself. Gabbard didn't say whether she'd be joining the Republican Party, but even if we don't agree on every issue, I think conservatives would welcome her no-nonsense, straight-shooting approach. I know my grandmother would have liked her. And though I cannot speak for my namesake, I can and love to speak about her and what she taught me. I'm going to do that today and hopefully tease out some lessons that she passed on to me to pass on to you. I was about your age when Clare Boothe Luce invited me to travel with her on a trip to Asia. The invitation, as Michelle mentioned, came following a large family gathering where Clare cornered me and asked me a number of pointed questions. A test, if you will, that I didn't know I was taking. Apparently I passed, and thus began a deeply personal and enlightening relationship with my brilliant, beautiful, funny, and very intimidating namesake. As a child, my relationship with her and my grandfather, Henry Luce, was rather formal, as was typical of the era. I didn't understand the role they played on the world stage until I was older. But once I did, I understood better why introducing myself to new teachers or the parents of new friends often got a range of bewildering reactions. Mostly they were of subdued surprise, followed by intensified scrutiny. I will never forget, at about the age of 8, I was at the home of a new classmate who, upon hearing her father was home from work, bounded up to him saying, "Daddy, meet my new friend, Clare Luce." He nearly choked on his martini. I can still hear the whispers and sputtering that followed as we went skipping out of the room. Over the years and journeys that followed, Clare shared many pieces of her life, offered insights into our complex family, sage advice on any issue, large or small, and dove deep into a variety of subjects from scuba diving to diplomacy. Getting to know her over time, gaining insight into her actual person, not the one people thought they knew, not only helped me to know the person for whom I was named, but to know myself better, to go deep beyond the superficial labels I'd been given. We live in a whole world of labels. I was labeled just by being a Luce and a Clare, double whammy. People drew assumptions the moment they heard my name. I got very shrewd at detecting that moment when the invisible wheels started turning in the mind of a new acquaintance. At first it was off-putting, but I learned to embrace it, to wear my labels well. Of course, today there is a new label in town. Political fashion has shifted and the new C word is conservative. I'm betting every one of us here knows the feeling when we detect that those inevitable wheels start to turn in the minds of others when they learn that's what we are. They think they can pigeonhole us, attack us, and worse, lecture us about our privilege, ignorance, and misguided love for Brooks Brothers. So I want to start by saying, well done you. Just by being here, you are already wearing your label well. I am sure you run into detractors and critics in your colleges and amongst your peers all the time. You know, those super woke, gender confused, diversity, equity, and inclusion drones that roam your campuses toting BLM flags and championing Marxism. What a joyless bunch they are. If Clare Boothe Luce were here today, she would ignore those bores and focus on you. She'd tell you to keep wearing your label proudly, because there has never been a more important time to advertise, promote, and defend conservatism. But how? How do we do it? If we want to do ourselves and conservatism proud to wear the label well, being here today is certainly a great first step, but I humbly offer up a few more, all of course inspired by my grandmother. 5 pro tips for being a proud conservative today. First, fight smart. This is a biggie. You've got to read, research, and know your audience. Clare was constantly up against, mostly male, detractors who always thought they were smarter than she was or would use some misogynistic remark to throw her off her game. Something I am sure you've all experienced. She never backed down or was intimidated. She outwitted them and outsmarted them because she was thoroughly prepared. I know it isn't easy to challenge your professors or a campus mob, but you will be far more effective by being articulate and remaining calm and unemotional. Seek wise counsel to hone your argument. Read Michelle Malkin and Victor Davis Hanson. Listen to young conservatives like Candace Owens, Ben Shapiro, and Charlie Kirk. Take note of their countenance and delivery. They are particularly impressive when being challenged. They hold their own because they own their narrative. Rise to the challenge, use every experience to get better, and play the long game. Clare did. She'd said, I don't have a warm personal enemy left. They all died off. I miss them because they helped to define me. Second, develop a sense of humor. It's been said a few times today. I couldn't agree with it more. If there was one thing Clare had in spades, it was wit. Read her play The Women or watch the original movie, and you will see what I mean. If you're not a natural, create a cheat sheet of comebacks. Don't lose the chance to win over an audience by making them smile. The fastest way into a stuck brain is to loosen it with a laugh. Humor is an especially potent tool when it's wielded by a woman. Too often we feel we must be deadly serious to be taken seriously. Don't make that mistake. Funny can be captivating and also disarming. You don't need belly laughs, just the sense that telling the truth doesn't need to taste like, well, kale salad. Third, travel as much as possible. William F. Buckley said, "There is no subject on which Clare Boothe Luce cannot illuminate." And believe me, I can attest to that. From her, I learned to challenge my own life experiences by being curious and adding others' experiences to my own. If you are interested in how others formulate their arguments and their lives, you will become more interesting. It will make you smarter, and that will strengthen your confidence. Curiosity helps you hear and then be heard. So keep opening yourself up to new sights and cultures. Keep your perspective fresh. If you can't travel physically, travel through literature. Trust me, it's important, and believe me, Instagram stories don't count as literature. Neither do TikTok hashtags. Try something a little longer and wiser. Antonia Fraser, Hilary Mantel, Ann Patchett, David McCullough. Fourth, please, please, please don't forget about history like everyone else. It's crazy to have to say this, but it's to our advantage to know what actually happened. Understanding the truth about the past will always strengthen your perspective. In this current woke culture, there is a concerted effort to rewrite history. And as a sage pundit recently said, being woke where history is concerned is like having a magical moral time machine where you judge everyone from the past by the standards of the present. Remember, no culture is perfect, and every civilization has had its share of atrocities. The better we know and understand history, the better the chance of not repeating the same mistakes. One burning of witches is quite enough. And finally, if you have not yet developed a spiritual faith, I highly recommend you take the time to explore the subject. People may tell you religion is irrelevant in this scientific and computer-driven age, but that simply isn't true. Having a spiritual view, no matter what denomination or practice, can provide stability and strength for you as an individual, a spiritual prism through which to see the world, a sense of peace, no matter how volatile the world gets. Through Clare's deep religious faith, though it was not her motivation, it made her an even more powerful messenger of conservative values. So be true to yourself about what you believe and live according to those beliefs. It's beneficial both physically and mentally. Living your life according to the values of your peers is the opposite. You cannot compel others to conservatism if you don't have a deep-rooted belief yourself. And when you have done these things, and I hope you continue to do them for a lifetime, you'll wear your label well, even more confidently. You will walk proud and speak up in this often angry, hostile world with grace and gusto. You may not win every argument, but you'll fight better and be heard. To be a conservative today takes courage. The kind of courage it took to be a playwright turned congresswoman, making a difference in an age when women were, well, just supposed to make dinner. Indeed, courage is the ladder on which all other virtues mount, Clare said, and I agree. She added to that thought in a comment that rings down the ages and is more relevant today than it ever was. She said, "Censorship, like charity, should begin at home, but unlike charity, it should end there." Ah, that's the thing, isn't it? The bottom of bottom lines. While the woke mob marched the streets, shouting, pitchforks in hand, mobbing the low road, we took the high one. We watched, listened, learned, and calmly figured out what was happening. It was important to take that time and do that observing, even when the mob started to silence and censor us. Now, confident in our observations and knowledge, it is thrilling to see how people are starting to step off the sideline, take off the muzzle, and speak up. A respected editor in the UK has started an organization offering legal support to people canceled on social media. Famed cognitive psychologist Steven Pinker has wisely said Enough with the virtue signaling. The fourth R in education should be rationality. Folks like Vivek Ramaswamy are combating wokeness in business with best-selling books and investments that put excellence over politics. Platforms like PragerU and Daily Wire have an ever-growing following, and more well-known comedians are successfully pushing back against the cancel culture. It's happening. All kinds of people are figuring out all kinds of angles to do battle with destructive, woke doomsaying, promote common sense, and champion conservative clarity. The question now is, what will you do? How will you wear your label as well as you possibly can? The moment is right now to shine on a light on conservatism with every bit of sophistication and savvy we have. So whatever you do, find your angle. Speak up in whichever way is right for you. And I promise I will be listening. And so will many, many others. Thank you.